Rio de Janeiro, before dawn on the 17th of November 1889. A carriage moves through empty streets down to the docks, escorted by soldiers who are being careful to be polite.
Extremely polite, apologetic by some accounts. They salute him.
An old man with a white beard boards a ship with his family, having been given a few hours' notice and a request that he leave the country he has governed for 58 years.
No crowd, no gunfire, no resistance anywhere in a country the size of a continent.
A monarchy that ruled half of South America has been abolished in about 36 hours, and almost nobody has fired a shot.
Pedro II, Emperor of Brazil, the only long-lived monarchy in the Americas.
A man who read 7 languages, corresponded with Darwin and with Pasteur, and was arguably the most respected head of state in the Western Hemisphere.
And this is the story of how a popular, decent, genuinely liberal emperor was removed by people who could not really explain why they wanted him gone.
Which is what makes this episode different from every other one in the series. There's no cellar, no scaffold, no firing squad.
Just a very quiet morning, and a man nobody was angry with being asked to leave.
So how did Brazil end up with an emperor in the first place? Because it's an accident of European war.
1807, Napoleon's army marches on Lisbon, and the entire Portuguese royal court, somewhere between 10 and 15,000 people, is evacuated by the British Navy.
To Brazil. So for 13 years, a European kingdom is governed from Rio de Janeiro.
Which has consequences nobody planned. The colony gets opened to world trade, it gets a printing press, a bank, a library, a medical school.
And eventually the formal status of a co-equal kingdom rather than a possession.
Then, in 1821, the king goes back to Portugal, and the Lisbon Parliament tries to shove Brazil back down into colonial subordination.
And his son Pedro stays and declares independence in 1822, becoming Emperor Pedro I.
Which means Brazil became independent without the long, ruinous wars that fractured Spanish America into 18 separate countries.
It stayed one country, and it stayed a monarchy. Both of those things flow from that one decision.
Pedro I, though, was impulsive and unpopular, lost a war in the south that created Uruguay,
and abdicated in 1831 to go and pursue a throne dispute back in Portugal, leaving behind a 5-year-old son.
And that boy's childhood was, in its own way, brutal. Abandoned by a father who sailed away, raised by tutors and guardians in near total isolation.
On a schedule of study that ran most of his waking hours, surrounded by adults maneuvering for control of the regency in his name.
He had almost no friends his own age. He was, effectively, an item of state property from the age of 5.
And he grew up serious, bookish, and dutiful to the point of self-erasure.
And he formed a habit that never left him. He treated the throne as a job description rather than a birthright.
Which sounds admirable. And it is admirable, and it's also, in the end, exactly what kills the monarchy.
The Regency years, 1831 to 1840, were violent. Regional revolts broke out all over the country.
Some of them enormous. The Kabanagem in the Amazon, which may have killed a significant fraction of the region's population.
The Baleada in Maranhão, the 10-year Ragamuffin War in the far south.
And the elites concluded that only a crowned adult monarch could hold the whole thing together.
So in 1840, they simply declared the 14-year-old legally of age. He was crowned at 15.
And what followed was, by the standards of 19th century Latin America, close to miraculous.
50 years, a functioning parliament with real debate, an independent press that mocked him routinely and was never censored.
Regular alternation between conservative and liberal cabinets, and no successful coup for half a century on a continent where governments changed by gunfire.
With one enormous exception hanging over all of it, which we'll come to, because it's the thing that ends him.
He held what was called the moderating power, a constitutional authority to dissolve parliament and appoint ministers.
And he used it constantly to rotate the parties in and out, which was manipulative.
And also kept the system from ossifying into one-party rule. Both things are true.
He suppressed the international slave trade under British pressure, and then kept going beyond what the British required.
He won the War of the Triple Alliance against Paraguay, 1864 to 1870.
which was a horrifying conflict. It killed a substantial fraction of the entire Paraguayan population, one of the deadliest wars proportionally in modern history.
And cost Brazil enormously in money and lives. Hold on to that one too, because the army that won it comes back changed.
And then the good list. Railways, telegraphs, schools. He funded students' studies abroad out of his own personal allowance.
He toured the United States and Europe, visited the Philadelphia Centennial Exhibition in 1876.
Where he reportedly picked up Alexander Graham Bell's telephone, listened, and exclaimed out loud that the thing talks.
Victor Hugo called him a grandson of Marcus Aurelius, which is the sort of compliment that would go to most people's heads.
And he also, repeatedly, said out loud that he did not believe in monarchy in principle, and that Brazil would probably become a republic eventually.
Which is a remarkable thing for an emperor to say, and an absolutely fatal signal to send to your own supporters.
If the man on the throne is indifferent to the throne, why would anyone else defend it?
And underneath all of it sat the institution that was going to bring the whole thing down.
Slavery. Brazil imported more enslaved Africans than any other country in the Americas, roughly 40% of the entire transatlantic trade.
Nearly 5 million people, and it was the last country in the Western Hemisphere to abolish it.
Its economy, its plantations, and the fortunes of the entire landed class rested on it.
And Pedro personally regarded it as a moral stain and said so privately for decades. He freed the enslaved people in his own household.
Privately, for decades, while signing the laws of a state that ran on it and being praised in Paris for his enlightenment.
That's the sharpest thing anyone can say about him, and it's fair.
His defense, such as it is that the slaveholding planters were the backbone of the political system that made him emperor, and he was constitutionally cautious by temperament.
So abolition came in painfully gradual stages. 1871, the law of free birth. Children born to enslaved mothers are free,
while being required to serve until adulthood. So free, in a sense, that involves working for the man who owns your mother until you're 21.
1885, the sexagenarian law, freeing the enslaved over 65.
Most of whom had already been worked past any usefulness and were now released to support themselves at 65 with nothing.
Each step angered the planters without satisfying the abolitionists, which is the worst possible position in a moral argument.
And then in 1888, the end came fast, and it came while he was out of the country.
He was in Europe, seriously ill with diabetes and complications, close enough to death that they'd begun preparing announcements.
And his daughter, Isabel, was serving as regent, and she was a committed abolitionist in a way her father had never quite managed to be in public.
On the 13th of May, 1888, she signed the Golden Law.
Abolishing slavery outright. No compensation to owners, no transition period. 2 sentences long.
Around 700,000 people freed. There were celebrations in the streets of Rio for days.
It was the right thing, done at last, and it removed the last pillar holding up the throne.
Explain that, because it's the crux of the episode.
The planter class, particularly in the coffee regions, was ruined, or believed itself ruined, and it had just discovered that the monarchy would not protect its property.
So overnight, the most conservative supporters of the empire became completely indifferent to its survival.
Many of them drifted straight into republicanism out of pure resentment, not principle, spite.
And by then, he had already lost his other 2 supports.
The church first. He'd quarreled with the bishops in the 1870s over Freemasonry and had 2 of them imprisoned.
A fight he won legally and lost completely in terms of clerical goodwill. The priests never forgot it.
And then the army, which mattered most of all.
The officers who had won the Paraguayan War came home believing they had saved the nation.
And found themselves poorly paid, subordinated to civilian politicians they regarded as amateurs, and forbidden by regulation to discuss politics in the press.
A series of disciplinary disputes through the 1880s, the so-called military question, hardened into a settled conviction
that the empire did not respect them, and an army that believes it saved the country and was not thanked for it is a dangerous institution.
and many of the younger officers had absorbed positivist philosophy, which was fashionable in the military academy.
which promised rational, technocratic government by qualified men. Their motto ended up on the Brazilian flag: order and progress.
And then the succession, which nobody wanted to discuss politely.
Pedro was visibly failing, and his heir was Isabel, a woman in a deeply patriarchal political culture.
Married to a French prince, the Count of Eu, who was unpopular, foreign, and partially deaf, which people were unkind about.
So even Brazilians who genuinely admired the emperor were unenthusiastic about the next chapter, and the emperor's own stated indifference gave nobody a reason to fight for it.
And the coup itself was almost comically thin.
The 15th of November, 1889, Marshal Deodoro da Fonseca, an old soldier and a personal friend of the emperor,
Who was not even a Republican, who had to be talked into it, at length, while ill in bed.
he led troops into central Rio, apparently under the impression, at first, that he was moving against the cabinet rather than the throne.
There's an account of him only realizing partway through the morning that a republic was being declared in his name.
The government fell without resistance, and a republic was proclaimed by civilians who had been organizing for years and who now had to hurry to catch up with the soldiers who'd done it for them.
There was no popular uprising at all.
One contemporary writer famously observed that the people watched the whole thing in bewilderment, as though they were seeing a parade.
And loyal troops elsewhere in the country could have contested it, that's the thing. He could have fought.
And Pedro refused to allow it. He said he would not have Brazilians killing each other over him.
He also declined an offer to stay on and reign as a constitutional figurehead under new terms.
Which is either enormous dignity or a final act of the same detachment that got him there. Probably both at once.
The provisional government exiled the imperial family within days and banned them from returning.
He died in a hotel room in Paris in December 1891, aged 66, with a packet of Brazilian soil under his pillow.
He'd asked for it to be brought from home. He wanted to be able to reach it.
And the republic that replaced him spent its first decade under military presidents and then settled into an oligarchic arrangement where two states traded the presidency between them.
In 1920, the ban on the imperial family was lifted, and his remains were brought home to a state funeral.
So, the verdict, and it's the strangest one in the series.
Pedro II lost his throne not because he governed badly, but because he governed well enough that nobody needed him.
He freed the enslaved and lost the planters. He defended civilian rule and lost the army.
He respected the church's limits and lost the clergy, and he told everyone, repeatedly, that he didn't much believe in monarchy anyway.
A ruler who refuses to build a faction of his own may well keep his integrity completely intact.
He should not expect anybody to be standing beside him at the end.
Nobody hated Pedro II. That was the problem. Nobody needed him either.
This was History But Better, podcast episode 16.